Father Claudio Doglio presents The Passion of Jesus according to St. Matthew. This is video number 11. His blood be upon us. Pilate fails in all his attempts to free Jesus. The tumult grows more and more. The people, urged on by the authorities, cry out for Jesus to be condemned. At this time, the governor has a significant gesture. He took water and washed his hands in the sight of the crowd. It has become almost proverbial to say, washed his hands, and to attribute to Pilate a gesture of indifference as one who did not want to assume responsibility. However, the evangelist Matthew, the only one who narrates this gesture of Pilate, puts in the mouth of the governor an important sentence: I am innocent of this man's blood. He pretends to exonerate himself from the responsibility of Jesus' death sentence. He considers him innocent blood. Blood is a non-Roman expression, so it does not belong to Pilate's language. It is certainly an elaboration of the evangelist who has a biblical, cultural basis and uses the expression innocent blood according to a biblical formulation to indicate one who has been condemned to death without reason. Pilate vindicates his innocence regarding the blood of Jesus. He says to the Jewish authorities, "Look to it yourself." It is the same thing the priests had said to Judas, leaving him responsible. The gesture of washing his hands derives from a biblical rite codified in the book of Deuteronomy, in chapter 21. And perhaps Matthew alludes precisely to this eventuality. The ancient text says that whoever finds a corpse of a man murdered in a field without knowing who killed him, the elders of the nearest city, not to be responsible for that innocent blood, shall wash their hands and say, our hands did not shed this blood. And so they pray to the Lord, do not impute innocent blood to your people Israel. To wash one's hands is to declare to have clean hands. It is an expression that is repeated, for example, in Psalm 26, where the speaker declares, in innocence I wash my hands and I go round about your altar. And in Psalm 73, the praying one complains to the Lord, saying, in vain have I kept my heart pure, and in innocence have I washed my hands. Washing hands indicates innocence, non-responsibility for an unjust condemnation. Therefore, Pilate is not responsible for this condemnation. The evangelist Matthew strongly emphasizes his innocence, while all the responsibility falls on the people. Matthew puts in the mouth of the people a very harsh phrase. His blood be upon us and upon our children. This too is a typically biblical expression. We find, for example, pronounced by Solomon in the first book of Kings, chapter 2, when the young man who had just ascended to the throne orders the murder of Joab, who was David's general, and affirms that the blood of the victim will fall on his head and the head of his descendants because he is responsible. In the same way, Jeremiah in chapter 26, when arrested by the temple authorities, says, "Know that if you kill me, you lay innocent blood upon yourselves and upon this city and its inhabitants. That is, you are responsible for my death." The blood invoked upon them and their children indicates an assumption of responsibility. Matthew wants to affirm that the responsibility for the condemnation to the death of Jesus, who is innocent, is the people. Unfortunately, this phrase has been used throughout the centuries against the people of Israel, illegitimately attributing guilt to all the descendants of that people, precisely by that evocation, "His blood be upon us and upon our children." We must read this sentence not in the sense of a curse, because the Christian community has known how to interpret the event of Jesus' condemnation as a source of blessing. The blood of Jesus, St. John affirms in his first letter, purifies us from all sin. The blood of Jesus upon us is not a curse, but a source of salvation. It cleanses us from sin. Therefore, there is no evil polemic against the Jewish world on this page of the evangelist Matthew, but a historical underlining of responsibility, and at the same time a theological indication of the power of the blood of Christ, which is beneficial even to enemies. It is innocent blood. To shed it, one is guilty. And yet the blood of Jesus cleanses us from all sin. To invoke it upon us is to ask to be set free from all guilt. At this point, Governor Pilate abandons Jesus into the hands of the people, releases Barabbas, has Jesus scourged, and handed him over to be crucified. That important verb, to deliver, handed over, returns once again, and the soldiers reform a scandalous parody. They mock Jesus as King of the Jews. The evangelist put together a series of 12 verbs to describe in a compelling succession the various gestures of mockery. They stripped him naked. They put a red robe on him as if he were a Roman authority. They wove him a crown of thorns and put it on his head. Instead of a genuine crown, a sorrowful parody. And instead of a wand, they put it in his right hand a reed. They feigned worship by kneeling before him, mocking him, calling him King of the Jews, and saluting him with a haire, the typical Greek way of wishing him joy and health. They spit on his face. With a reed they strike in his head. They mock him. They strip him of his red robe and put his robe back on him. When the parody of royalty is over, they take him to crucify him. Yet Jesus is truly the King silent, mocked, and humiliated. He sheds his blood for the salvation of all, even those who mock him, insult him, and do not recognize him. Let us invoke the good power of his blood, which purifies us from all sin. When Pilate saw that he was not succeeding at all, but that a riot was breaking out instead, he took water and washed his hand in the sight of the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. Look to it yourselves. And the whole people said in reply, His blood be upon us and upon our children. Then he released Barabbas to them. But after he had Jesus scourged, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus inside the praetorium and gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him of his clothes and threw a scarlet military cloak about him. Weaving a crown out of thorns, they placed it on his head and a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! They spat upon him and took the reed and kept striking him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of his cloak, dressed him in his own clothes, and led him off to crucify him.
Signore, da te, che più grande chi più sa servire, chi si abbassa e chi si sa